Hello, and welcome back to So What, the Imperfect Sewist, a place where we don't judge or expect perfection, but instead we're here to hold your hands through your beginner sewing journey. So, what are you sewing today? Today I want to talk about the hard reality or the harsh reality of learning to sew. Here are 5 truths nobody tells you about. So, if you recently picked up sewing and you bought your first sewing machine and you're expected to immediately start whipping out custom wardrobe and perfect home decor, only to end up crying over a tangled knot of thread at 11 p.m., take a deep breath. You are not alone, and you're definitely not bad at sewing. The truth is, social media makes sewing look like this magical, effortless craft where you cut out some fabrics, zip it through a machine in 5 minutes, and then you step out in a perfect outfit. Nobody shows you the skipped stitches, the uneven hems, or the hours spent unpicking seams. Today, we're getting real about this. We're covering 5 harsh sewing truths every beginner needs to know. And believe me, knowing these upfront wouldn't demotivate you. It actually is going to save you from quitting. And make sure you stick around for truth number 2 because it reveals where 80% of your actual sewing time goes. And it's not sitting at your sewing machine. So let's dive in. So, truth number 1, unsewing is 50% of the craft. The seam ripper is your best friend. I often talk about this in every sewing video I do. Beginners view a seam ripper as a sign of failure, but let me tell you, experienced sewists view it as an essential editing tool. Even sewists who have been sewing for 20 years and have 20 years of experience with often have to seam rip. I can give you an example. Just this past Sunday, I was doing a live, and of course, I started to make a mistake. And the first thing I reached for, my seam ripper. Your fabric could shift, the bobbin could run out, a seam could be, wonky, sleeves get sewn upside down. Don't think and don't throw away a fit when don't throw a fit when a seam goes crooked. View the seam ripper as a reset button that allows you to make your project perfect. If you aren't ripping seams, you're not learning. And believe me, you want to rip seams to come up with perfection. Truth number 2, sewing is actually 80% measuring, cutting, and ironing. Now, I can tell you 2 of these things I do not like, and they are the measuring and the ironing piece. However, it is so important that you focus and take time to really, really perfect your craft when it comes to this. People think sewing is just stepping on a foot pedal and gliding fabric through a thread. The harsh reality actually is that actual time at the sewing machine accounts for approximately 20% of the project. The rest is pre-washing your fabric, pressing your fabric, taping the PDF pattern, and accurately cutting pieces on the grain line. I can assure you I've had a PDF pattern where I had like almost 46 pages. I think it was exactly 46 pages. And that was a lot of work because not only did I have to print it out, I had to put it together. That took a lot more time than I thought it would take. But here's the thing, actually sewing that jacket, it was a jacket I was making, it was a kimono jacket. Actually sewing that took less than an hour. And putting the pattern together, stitching everything, so, and taping it all together on my fabric took a lot more time, pressing seams and all of that. Pressing seams at the iron, after every single line of stitching is also very important. This is something you cannot avoid. That's something I do not like. I'm not going to pretend to like it. However, it is something you absolutely need to learn to do as a sewist. And there's a difference between pressing and ironing. Okay, so this is how I always explain it to my students when I teach online. You press seams to keep the lines smooth, and you iron when you're trying to get rid of creases. Okay, so when you skip ironing your project, you set yourself up for failure because when you press, it sets the stitches into the fiber, and unpressed seams look homemade, they look bulky and puckered, and your press seams look a lot more professional. So I can't overemphasize this. If you are someone who wants to learn, who wants to grow, you absolutely want to press your seams and learn to do that earlier on. Measuring is also another important part. You have to measure and also read through your pattern to account for a seam allowance. Sometimes people think, oh, I'm just going to glaze through and then just cut it along the lines. Sometimes there's a difference between the outer line and the inner line and what you need to cut. So when you are going to start with any project, first make sure you're measuring, make sure you're prepping your fabric, make sure you're ironing. Those are things you simply cannot skip. And yes, that does take up about 80% of the time for your sewing. Now, today's podcast is sponsored by Aspire Drinks, a green tea powered energy drink. Use code SEWJOY, that's SEWJOY, to get 20% off of your next purchase on the Aspire Drinks website. I'm going to leave the link down in the description so you can pick yours up today. Now, let's continue. We have three more harsh truths to get through, including why cheap fabric is actually ruining your progress. But real quick, if this video is making you feel a whole lot better about your sewing journey, hit that subscribe button and give this episode a thumbs up. It helps our beginner sewers community and it helps me grow. So yes, let's see. If you want simple, frustration-free projects designed specifically to build your skills step by step, head on over to my website to check out some of my beginner digital patterns. They come with clear instructions so you don't spend hours stuck in confusion. And that is www.isewwithjoy.com. Now let's talk about truth number 3 and why your machine might not actually be broken after all. This is usually a part of user error. And let me explain this. And sometimes that's actually good news. So if you have a machine that keeps jamming, please don't panic. The bottom thread, if there's a nest and you think it's completely broken, do not panic. When you panic, it starts to make you feel confused. And a lot of times a panicked brain does not necessarily take the time to stop and understand exactly what's going on. So everybody goes through this. I mean, I wish I still had this project when I was first sewing with, as an adult, when I went back to sewing for little ones. I had a lot of issues with my threads not working, using the wrong weighted thread for the top versus the bottom and different things like that. And I'm going to admit I'm human. At first I panicked. However, over time I realized panicking does not solve the problem. You need a clear mind to think through what's going on and then eventually solve whatever issue you're facing. 95% of the time, the machine is not broken. So this issue is one of 3 simple things that could occur. The first one being incorrect threading. When you thread your machine with the presser foot down, it prevents the thread from sitting in the tension disc. So what you need to do is make sure your presser foot is up when you're threading your machine. Then some machines actually will stop you from being able to fully thread your machine if you have an automatic threader. My brother machines, I have both an SE1900 and SE600 and 400 and a few other CS 6000XI. But some of those machines will not allow you to continue or to thread your machine, especially when it has the automatic threader, if your presser foot is down. So you want to look and see, where is my presser foot? Make sure it's up. The other issue that it could be is a dull or wrong needle. When you use a dull needle or the wrong type of needle, a universal needle on thick canvas, for example, or stretching knits, you run into problems. Sometimes people just forget that, just because the needle is there does not mean it can sew everything. You need a special type of needle for jeans fabric. You need a special type of needle for canvas, which usually about the same. You need a special type of needle for silk, satin, lighter cotton, linen fabrics, and different things like that. The reason for that is because you want to make sure that the way your needle pokes or pierces your fabric leaves it looking crisp and not puckered up. So make sure you're also looking into the type of needle you're using when you're starting to sew. The third thing, which I am guilty of, and I have a TikTok video about this, is lint buildup. Dust and threads, bits and pieces of all the little things you've sewn over the years, in my case, clog the bobbin case. So what I will say is set a date on your calendar. It should be recurring, that you are determined to go in there and fully clean out your sewing machine. It's not hard. And if you bought a brand new machine, you can always look at the manual. And even if it's not brand new, you can actually find a lot of videos on YouTube or different sites where it walks you through how to clean out your bobbin case. So before panicking, don't buy a new machine. Try rethreading your machine with the presser foot up. Put in a fresh needle to make sure you're using the right needle, and ensure that your bobbin case is clean. Here's number 4. I can't seem to count today. Using cheap materials makes sewing 10,000% harder. or I could say it's 10 times harder, whatever way you want to look at it. Beginners often buy the cheapest, flimsiest polyester or slippery synthetic fabric because they are scared of wasting good fabric. I wish I could show you my fabric stash. I save it for a good day, a rainy day. So here's the paradox. Cheap, slippery, or stretchy fabrics are extremely difficult to handle, especially if you're a beginner sewist. They shift, they stretch out of shape, and melt under a hot iron. So making a beginner feel a lot more stressed out about working with these fabrics. Here's the solution. Start with 100% woven cotton, linen, or thrifted bed sheets or curtains. When I teach sewing online, that is what I always tell people. Don't go out and buy expensive fabric. However, don't get flimsy fabric. You want to start with 100% cotton. And the best way to do that, pick up a bed sheet. You could probably find one at the thrift store, or you could possibly find one at Walmart for about $5.99, depending on the size of the sheet you're getting. You don't want to buy something that you're not going to be able to really work with. And if you're picking something that's polyester, over time, you just start to see that it's just not the right fit for learning. So I really, really encourage people to just get a bed sheet, pillowcase, go to the thrift store. There's so many of them there, and just pick up a few for a few dollars and get practice in. So woven cottons tend to stay in place where you put them, and they press like a dream and give you instant success. So when you're working with that, it ensures that you don't feel discouraged the first time you run into issues. So now here's truth number 5. Store-bought sizes mean nothing in sewing. Okay, it really means nothing. Sewing pattern sizes do not correlate to ready-to-wear store sizes. I made this mistake because I picked up a pattern, and this is when I first started making clothes for myself. I picked up a pattern, and I was like, well, at the time I was like a size 12. And I was like, oh yeah, it's a size 12. It was not the same thing. So if you wear a size 8 in retail clothing, you might be a size 14 or 16 in a sewing pattern. Beginners cut their actual, they cut the usual size without measuring, spending time, and then they spend hours sewing, and they end up with a garment that just does not fit, and you feel squeezed in. I can tell you when I finished sewing that actual, and this was not the kimono jacket, this was actually it was a baby doll dress, and when I finished sewing it, I had to let the top out because I did not realize that it was just too tight for me, I guess is the word I would use. So always measure your body, your bust, your waist, your hips, and then with a flexible tape for every project, and pick your pattern size based on the measurements on the chart. Usually you will find this on the back side of the pattern you pick up. So don't go by the store-bought and never the retail store sizes, and never the size number on the envelope. That is not going to help you. You need to make sure that you're actually measuring things out and you know exactly what size you're working with. So to wrap this all up, sewing takes patience, practice, a lot of seam ripping, but accepting these 5 truths is what turns a frustrated beginner into a confident, skilled sewist. You're not failing, you're learning the process. Now I want to hear from you in the comments which of these 5 truths hit closest to home for you. Did you have a battle with your seam ripper or iron recently? Let's chat about it. So thank you so much for tuning into the podcast today. Don't forget to visit my website for beginner-friendly patterns. Keep practicing, and I will see you in the next video. Happy sewing!